With the Try3 Trial released in Japan, it's time to decide which one runs supreme. Stand up, Vanguard! You might have seen all the unboxing videos and trial deck videos for the Try3 trial decks, as this weekend these trial decks were released in Japan. But there's one thing that hasn't been touched upon, and that is the answer of which of these three trial decks is the best among them. And that is what we're gonna try to answer in today's discussion. One disclaimer before we head into this video, I'm only gonna look at these trial decks with the support that came prior to it. So I'm not gonna look at the potential support, what we're going to get in the next stage extra booster set, as that is a bit unfair towards Neo Nectar and in some extent Royal Paladin, as we don't have the full scope of what their support is gonna do in that set. So we're gonna only look at the trial decks themselves and all the support that came before it, with every extra booster and main set that happened in the V era, and if we're gonna look at premium, also with everything that premium has to offer. But before we can deduce which one is better, we have to dive into these trial decks themselves and see which new cards they have to offer to their respective clans and what they can do to synergize with already existing archetypes. And of course we start off with the one for Gear Chronicle, the Chronocle trial deck, and honestly, what this trial deck has to offer isn't really a lot, as the unique cards in this trial decks are the new Grade 4 Metallica Phoenix, the Chronojet Dragon Grade 3, the Stroboscope Dragon Grade 2, Gears Repeater and Baron Rover, and just generic cards in the form of Steam Fencer Idea and Steam Gunner your Laganda. And if you're gonna look at these cards one by one, you start to see that individually they aren't really that amazing, as Metallica Phoenix on its own is just a generic grade 4 with no skill but a triple drive, but we cannot ride it from our hand, meaning it can only be fetched out with the superior ride skills of Lost Legend, Chrono Fang, and Chronojet Dragon himself. And of course the opposite to this card is the fact that you trade in the discard for the extra drive check, so you're not minusing through the ability. But besides that, doesn't really provide any useful interaction for the clan itself. It is a nice addition for a first right target within premium and potentially with the new Chronojet build with next stage, but that's about where it ends with this card. And of course Chronojet Dragon himself, without the future support for the next stage set, doesn't really do that much, because its superior ride ability doesn't synergize with its own Vanguard skill, as you're not gonna use it unless you go into next stage. If you're going to anything else, which currently we have no options towards, it doesn't really do anything unless you call to the Vanguard circle or you cannot use its superior ride ability at all, which isn't really that ideal. Then of course if we go into the other cards, we have Gears Repeater, which honestly is a really bad card in my opinion, as on plays from hand, Soulless 1 to just get an extra 5k power isn't really that good value. So that isn't really helping this argument for making Gear Chronicle the best trial decks of these three. Then of course we got Baron Rover, which is a nice consistency bump, but on the overall spectrum isn't something new, as it's just a different take on Wedge Move Drago Kit. Instead of you binding a card from hand, you discard a card from hand. It does synergize with other cards, but on the overall scheme of things, not that amazing. Then of course we've got Steam Fencer Idea, which is just a generic attacker. When boosted could become potentially 23k column. It's not something new, it's not revolutionary in any sense, and we have seen this many times before, and it will not make a difference for Gears. Also we've got the Grade 3 supporter card, and honestly its skill is actually pretty solid, because on attack for a counterblast 1 you can draw and get an extra 5k power. A draw is always around the same value of a counterblast, but then on top of that you also get the extra 5k power, which is a good value. But the problem here is that it's a grade 3, meaning you probably won't play it in Gears, as we already are cluttered with all those extra grade 4s that we need to run in our build. So that sadly is a negative part on the card. But there is, however, one card what is actually pretty good for Gear Chronicles, and that is Stroboscope Dragon, as it at the end of the battle could Soul Blast 1, discard a card, and then you can snipe something from your opponent's field, which is some extra controls within a Forest clan, which is always pretty good. But then if you're sitting on grade 4, you can draw back, so it also becomes a cycle engine, which is pretty nice. But its main application comes with Chrono Fang, as it synergizes with Chrono Fang, because you can use the whole Chrono Fang Rebellion ability, you waste all your counterblasts, but because this thing is a Soul Blast, means you can still utilize its ability, and with Chrono Fang already retiring the front row, this thing can then snipe something from the back row, meaning you really disrupt your opponent's field for putting up an offensive potentially next turn. And also the discard synergizes with your other cards within Chrono Fang, so that's also really nice. And if we take a better look at the premium side, then Metallica Phoenix and Chrono Jet Dragon becomes a lot better because they do synergize with a lot of things in premium. But if we're gonna take a look at premium as well, then there is another deck within this trio that will also upgrade the premium deck, but unlike Gears, is actually already a top tier contender. So this will also not really be a good thing for Gears if we want to take everything in consideration. So from the trial deck itself, the only actual useful card that we're going to get is Stroboscope Dragon, and it looks to be that this card won't even be used in the new Chrono Jet Dragon build itself, but is a good fit for something like Chrono Fang. Now with Gear Chronicle out of the way, let's dive into Royal Paladin. And Royal Paladin got some interesting cards in this trial deck, as we got the new Grade 3 Blue Night Sky Altmal, which is a potential very solid free attacker that can be a 28k unit on the Vanguard Circle as well as Rearguard Circle. But as a Vanguard unit, can also help you to filter your deck, as you can grab Grade 2s from your deck. And that is actually pretty good value, as it's a guaranteed +1, but at the same time you grab 2 Grade 2s from your deck, which then increases the chance of drive checking your triggers, and in this case potential crit triggers. So that is pretty good. Then of course we got the support Grade 3, which is on place from hand, you can call a Grade 2 and then you draw a card. This could be something like a free draw engine, as you can just call the Grade 2 so you have a full field. But at the same time, you can also call the Grade 2 on top of this unit if you don't want to have this Grade 3 on the field. And then you draw the card back, so then it becomes a pseudo cycle. So it's an interesting take. It won't probably be used in a lot of builds, but it is an interesting addition for Royals as a whole. Then of course we got Liverod, which is an insane card for Royals, as it is a solid searcher and a plus engine that also filters, but if you use all your counterblasts, then its cost will be turned into a Soul Blast, which is some really good value. So Liverod on its own is already a pretty good and significant card for Royals. Then we got Sage of Contentment Tedan, that could become a potential 24k beater, but honestly for Counterblast and Soul Blast, that's not good value. If it was only a Counterblast, then you could maybe make the argument as you want to turn everything face down, but the fact that it also costs a soul will basically make this card inefficient, as other powerful skills like Liverod is already using soul, and this will conflict with that in a big way. Then they got of course some generic cards like the Grade 1 that becomes an 11k attacker. It's not really that big of a deal. And also we got a very unique countercharger, as we have the Grade 1 6k, a Melodious Angel, that if you counterblast 2, you draw a card, and if everything's face down, you countercharge. But honestly, this is not really a good trade-off, because you countercharge 1, so effectively it could be a counterblast 1 for a draw. That is fine, but it's on a 6k body, which isn't that ideal. But you could say, well, you can put everything face down, as you could counterblast 2, and then with another skill counterblast 1, and then you could counterblast 3 in total. But that way you're just effectively wasting resources for potentially just a power increase for Altmal, and counterblast 2 for a draw. Not as great a value. This is not a really good card in my opinion. And finally, we got Felix, which is honestly a very solid card for Royals as well, as this card could bounce units back, so you could save your board presence with cards in hand. So you could rush in the early game, but then deny your opponent to damage deny you, because you can remove your attackers in the front row as well. As you could build an entire front row and then have 2 Felix in the back row, one behind your Vanguard and one in one column, and then you could remove both your attackers, or you could just put it behind your Vanguard and then every turn call one unit into the front row, and you can bounce that unit back every single turn if you keep rewriting. Also what's nice is that the unit gets plus 5k power, meaning if it's behind your Vanguard, then even if your opponent gets a defensive trigger on the first attack of your rearguard, you can still hit over defensive triggers. So this is a very solid early game rush aggro 2 option for Royals as well. Now if we take a look at the Royal Paladin trial deck as a whole, we can see that this trial deck is a really good synergy package, as every card synergizes really neatly with each other, unlike Gear Chronicles, where some of these cards aren't really taking the best advantage of their own skills, like Metallica Phoenix and Chrono Jet Dragon, for example. But there is one problem with this trial deck for Altmal, and that's the fact that Altmal's own ability cannot come to its full effect, because you can filter out your Grade 2s, But currently, the grade 2s that you can filter out in this deck aren't really the best of values. The only good card is Liverot, of course, but the other grade 2s, like Paladin and the 10k Vanilla, aren't really that good of a value. Sure, you can get the 10k Vanilla to hand and then you can have 10k shield value, but is that really what you want to do? But if we look back at the past, then we can actually get some good value of Altmal, because then we can tag in cards like Blaster Blade with Gordon. That's a really good 2-card combo that you can fetch out with Altmal without any problem. You can also tag in Altmal within the Blaster engine as a whole to search out multiple Blasters and then save up for next turn when you want to go on Messianic, for example. So there are some really good synergies because Royal Paladin is always been focused around grade 2s, and with Altmal just fetching out 2 grade 2s from your deck without any problem is a really good fit for Royal Paladin. So this is already looking a lot better as it gives Royal Paladin a good early game aggro option within the form of Felix. We got a good searcher within Liverot, which is a good grade 2. And then of course we got Bloom, Sky Knight, Altmal, which is an insane value that allows you to fetch out any 2-card combo or just filter your deck on a very efficient basis. And then lastly, we've got the one for Neo Nectar, and that is of course the trial deck for Arsha. And Arsha's units are pretty interesting, as we got of course Arsha with her own skill, which allows her to get some additional power and then create plant tokens, but more importantly create this Arsha Flower Fairy token, which then copies the power of the Vanguard as well as the Critical, which synergize really well with Force in general, with Force 1 and Force 2. And of course with the extra addition of the 10k power of Arsha's her on place effect, makes the token even better, as it can be a solid 33k attacker if you combine it with Force 1. But this isn't the only supporter we got, as we also got a solid grade 3 supporter that can turn itself into a 23k attacker for free if you ride Arsha and you create the Flower Fairy token, which isn't really that hard to do, which is honestly some pretty good value. But besides that, we also got Sela that with the same condition can be a 50k attacker, but she can also allow you to create even more plant tokens if you need more fodder for your Arsha Flower Fairy token, which is a good solid consistency bump for the deck. And she can also be used in the early game to have a more aggressive early game play as well. Then on top of that, we also got a solid 20k beater if you have a full field, and with Arsha creating multiple tokens and with Sela creating tokens, it's not really that hard to create a full field, so you can have a very good solid beater that's 20k, and if boosted with an 8k or a plant token could potentially be 25 or 28. And then with Arsha already being potentially 33, and then also a Flower Fairy token that can be 33 and potential other triggers, you can look at some very scary numbers you're already building here. Then of course we got some consistency cards for the Arsha deck, where we have Diane that can be a cycle tool, but also gives your Vanguard even more power, which also empowers the Arsha Flower Fairy token as well. Then we also got a solid booster in the likes of Maiden of Blue Lace that could also create another token, which either helps you to fuel your early game or to increase the consistency of building your Arsha's Flower Fairy token, which is overall a pretty good effect. And last, we got a very powerful booster in the likes of Momo Smo Peach, which can potentially be a 18k booster if you have 5 or more units. And this is an interesting thing, as if we combine Maiden of Bot Fist and this booster for a Soul Blast, you can create a 38k column, and you can create this turn after turn if you have full field. Compare this with Gear Chronicles, Gears Repeater, and Idina, which for a Soul Blast, if placed from hand Gears Repeater, so it can only be used once per copy, you create a 28k column. This is a 38k column, and you can do it turn after turn for the same cost. That shows you the big difference. And on top of that, Arsha can also create these Flower Fairy token, and you have Arsha's her own ability that allows her to be a very powerful beater on her own. So it's very obvious that this deck is a lot better. Also, the synergy within is much stronger than we've seen with Royals and with Gears, because unlike Royals, where Altmal is a very powerful unit, but it's limited to the cards that we have access to in the trial deck, Arsha doesn't really have that problem. Every single card in this trial deck combines very neatly and very efficiently with each other, and basically either gives you a very good early game or have a very powerful late game with a lot of strong attackers. You're not necessarily betting on your Arsha's Flower Fairy token to do the trick, but if you happen to build 1, that's pretty solid. If you happen to build 2, you probably won the game at that moment. And if we combine it with older support, then you could increase the value of your Arsha's Flower Fairy token on a more consistent basis, as you can combine it with all these extra token generators to up the consistency of stacking 3 units. You can also combine with other strong cards that interact with tokens. And of course, in the premium side, Arsha is a very nice fit for the planned token strategy in premium, as that will increase the consistency of the build as well, as you have another Vanguard on place effects that can create multiple tokens, which is pretty nice. So now that we have a good understanding of what each and every single trial deck can do, let's rank these trial decks on their own. And first off, let's just rank them on what the trial decks themselves offer. So nothing of the previous support, nothing of the future support, just what the trial decks themselves offer. And if we go by those criteria, then on third place we got Gear Chronicle, second place is Royal Paladin, and the number one winner of these trial decks, in my opinion, is then Neo Nectar's Arsha. And that's basically for all the reasons that's already stated in this video, because the Gear Chronicle trial deck doesn't really do anything on its own. Most of these cards are really awkward, and you're banking on the triple drive of Metallica Phoenix, and Chronicle doesn't really do anything besides that unless you call to the Rigard Circle, but then a Sentinel Restrict on a 15k attacker that could potentially be 23 or 28 isn't really all that significant. Then of course we do have control options within the build, but we cannot really capitalize on it all that efficiently. And against the other decks that can superior call multiple cards with the grade 2s and all the extra tokens you're generating, retiring one unit doesn't really do all that much. The Royal Paladin is a very solid build, as you got some really good early game aggro tools and also late game options within Liverod and Altmal. But the problem with this deck is that the synergy is a lot better than the one for Gear Chronicle, but it's not that amazing, as the problem is that Altmal is banking on the grade 2s, but without grade 2s that can be utilized from the back row, or having solid grade 2s in the trial deck themselves, makes Altmal a very limited card in its own right, because we're capping the power potential of this card, because the grade 2s aren't really that good. And then of course, Arsha is in my opinion one of the best cards because of how the Arsha's Flower Fairy token synergize with the rest of the trial deck, and of course the insane power generation that we can do with the boosters and attackers that can dish out of nowhere 28 to 38k columns without much problem. And then of course Arsha's is a very strong Vanguard deck, as you're stacking all the force markers on the Vanguard circle, and with the token also copying the Vanguard's power and critical, makes all your triggers all the more devastating, and that's a huge deal. And the reason why Arsha's taking away this number one spot is mainly because of her new token mechanic, as it's such a strong mechanic right out of the box, with just how it is functioning, with the fact that you can just utilize the triggers. And we got some support in this trial deck as well to make it even better, with the grade 1 that can give the Vanguard some extra power, and Arsha herself that gives another 10k to herself, which is some really good synergy. But if we take premium and every support wave in the past in consideration, then the standings are as following. On first place, we have still yet again Gear Chronicle, second place is Arsha, and first place is gonna go to Altmal. And the reason why Gear Chronicle is still in third place is that the trial deck doesn't synergize with anything that came before it, except Stroboscope Dragon, as for the reasons stated in this video with Chrono Thang. And sure, you can utilize Metallica Phoenix and Chrono Dragon in premium, but as I stated, it makes a non-existent premium strategy and makes it a little bit better, but currently it doesn't look to be a top tier contender with those two cards in the mix. Then Arsha does have some synergies with the previous support, but not amazing support. It doesn't suddenly makes the deck a lot better. You basically ups the consistency of creating the Arsha's tokens with the extra token generation, but you don't utilize the mechanic as well, as you're not powering up your Vanguard with extra abilities. You're not utilizing the token as much because you cannot boost it. So there are limited ways to increase the power potential of the deck. But with that said, you could incorporate Arsha within the token strategies for premium, but they're still in about how efficient it will be and how big of an impact it will make for the strategy. So I cannot take that aspect and weigh it in as a huge factor to put Arsha still on the first spot. Because Altmal is honestly, in my opinion, the number one trial deck if we take everything in consideration, because it synergizes with the entire clan. You can just fetch out anything. The fact that you can search out 2 grade 2s from your deck and put them to hand is a huge thing, as you can just fetch out 2 card combos. You have other search options, and if we take a sneak peek what we're gonna have in the future support set, then with the upcoming fact that we can utilize all our grade 2s as back row boosters and interceptors, that's some insane value we're starting to get. But even without that, I think Altman is the better trial deck, as it does synergize with the clan as a whole, as Royal Paladin has always been around grade 2 synergies, and going into an Altman, fetching out your grade 2s and setting up for that turn or your following turn is a huge deal. And even if your opponent is start damage denying you, you get extra free power as your Altman is suddenly turning into a 28k beater. And with the addition of the grade 1 as well to give you early game aggro, is pretty good for a Forest Clan if you can ditch out very powerful attacks early on and then deny your opponent from damage denying you. But this is basically my opinion on these trial decks. Let me know what your opinion is on which trial deck is the number one. So vote on this poll right here, which you think is the best trial deck among these three for Try3. But keep in mind, I analyzed this without the support of the next stage booster set, as we don't have all the cards yet. I will come back to this discussion when we got all the cards for Try3 from the next stage booster set, and I will start analyzing which of these three clans as a whole is the winner of this new support wave. So let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and of course in the poll to have a better understanding of what you guys think is the best trial deck out of these three. And let's discussion going and enjoy the new trial decks while they're out. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then you can head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!